I haven't really told many people this, and I haven't talked about it in interviews much, but here's a little scoop.
All right, here he is, the man, Bob Marlette. What's going on?
You know, I'm not too bad for an old, tired, fat guy. I'm doing pretty good. Thanks. Thanks for asking.
Well, I got to say, I know you're an older guy, but I don't think anybody would guess it. You look fantastic.
Well, let's be honest. I just dyed my beard earlier today. So when you told me that I was going to actually be on camera, I'm like, oh shit, maybe I should. I was starting to look a little like Santa Claus. So I thought, oh, okay, I better dye this, you know.
Yeah, we're a couple months late to the Santa Claus part.
Yeah. I always say my trophy wife will leave me if she finds out I'm old. So there you go.
Well, I want to start by saying that two of the projects that you've done, that's some of my favorites of all time, and probably not what comes to people's minds when they think of you. The more well-known one is of course, you wrote In Time, which is the song that saves the universe on Bill and Ted, which I got to say, you know, Excellent Adventure is a classic. My Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, though, the second one is, I mean, that's probably my all-time favorite movie. But, you know, the fact that you wrote the song that saved the world is incredible.
And I always laugh because it's like of all of the things that I've done in we're coming up on 50 years I've been making records now. Because I made my first record in 1972. And actually it's over
51 years, yeah. Wow.
God, I'm old. What's up with that? Damn. You know, I gotta be honest. People ask me about that. It's like, you know, and I say the coolest thing about being 67 at this point in my life is that I'm still making records for 16-year-olds, which
Absolutely.
is pretty badass. You know, it's like, I love that it's like, you know, the thing that I probably enjoyed, you know, the most about my career is this wide sort of, you know, birth of sort of records and all the different kind of stuff I've done. The hardest part of doing, you know, interviews and podcasts and things are when people ask, hey man, what snare did you use on the such and such song in 1982? When you like, are you kidding me? I can't even remember yesterday. So but yes, I get asked a lot about that song, and I always joke is like, you know, I wrote the song that saved the universe. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's all you need to do, right? And you know,
mic drop. I drop a mic, but they're all really nice mics, so I don't want to drop them. So
the other thing that you've done that I seriously one of my all-time favorite records, and I do think it's really underrated, but is Kicking and Screaming, Sebastian Bach. That album is so fucking good. And I think you even wrote a few of the songs on there too, right?
I probably did. I write on almost every record. I'm doing a lot of writing, you know, but you know, it's fun. My poor son has a horror story because my son, Chris, is actually, he's my right-hand man. He does a lot of work he's been working with me for 10 years now. And he is just a total badass. Actually, here's a little trivia for you that's pretty cool. So on that Red Sun Rising record that I did 4 or 5 years ago.
Is that
we had a couple
Polyester
of
Zeal?
Was
that Polyester Zeal, the first one?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. And that record was really cool because we had 2 number ones on that, and my son is playing drums on that record, and I'm playing bass on that record.
Oh, no kidding!
And as far as we've been told, and I'm sort of sticking with this because credible people have told us that's the first time a father-son combo has played on the same number one record. So
Wow, look at that.
Yeah, yeah. I thought that was pretty cool. That's he's so crazy talented. He does all the editing, and he does a lot of songwriting too, and he's a chip off the old block.
Was that who was before we started doing this? We
Yeah,
had some technical difficulties. That's who was helping
yeah,
you out.
yeah. That was Chris. He's kind of the brains of the operation. It's like, yeah, I'm the one that swoops in and takes all the glory, and yeah, so yeah.
Well, and like you mentioned, you write on most of the records, and I feel like people probably more so associate you as a producer. But I mean, I pulled up your credit list earlier, and I was just like, holy fuck! I mean, the list just never ended, and it was everything, producing, mixing, right? I mean, everything, which is incredible.
Well, it to me, I get asked that a lot. It's like, well, how do you delineate between all these sort of areas? To me, it's all stream of consciousness. It's like, it's sort of, I know this is going to sound a little weird, but a lot of times the record's finished in my head before we ever play a note, because
Sure.
it just, I'll a lot of times I'll just sit with the band and we'll have, discussions and talks about, how we see the vision of the record. And then once I get that sort of, implanted in my head, because there's been quite a few songs that I've written over the years that I never even like physically play I wrote the whole thing in my head, and then we just would, here are the chords of the song, but it's like sort of done in my head.
Well, and going back to the beginning, I mean, obviously you've come such a long way, because you grew up in Nebraska, and it was a bit of a musical household, though, right? I think you said before that your mom played piano and your dad was sort of like a music buff.
Yeah. Both my parents, it was mostly just their extreme love of music was just so infectious that it just, ever since I was young, they just always sort of had such excitement and passion for music. And it just, that really was the sort of groundwork for the whole thing, and then the rest of it was just, so much of it is just, if you're passionate and you love something that much, then everything else is just, figuring it out. Just work on it till you figure it out. So.
And it all kind of started when you were like 12 years old, right? I think, is that when you did the Battle of the Bands out in Nebraska?
I love that. Yeah, that, and it's funny because the one of the kids that was in that band with me, right? I'd just been getting like, Facebook stuff from him. It's like, oh my God, Pershing Auditorium. It's like, he was like, holy shit. He was like, because I had just, last week I had spoke for at a music class in Lincoln, Nebraska, at the University of Nebraska. And people were asking me, because they're about to take the wrecking ball to that venue.
Oh shit!
And I'm like, don't do it. It's like history was made there.
Did you guys win the Battle of the Bands?
Second place.
Wow.
But here's the cool thing. So we got second place, but the first place band, after that night, they called me up and asked me to join their band.
I bet the band that you left, those guys had to be pissing, right? Did you go to the other band or no?
Yeah, I went to the other band because they were really good, and it was just and that band actually I stayed with that band until the fateful meeting of when Rudy Sarzo and Frankie Banali from Quiet Riot had come through town, and that's how I really sort of got out of Lincoln. Is they came through town and were like, "Hey, dude, we're putting a band together, and you're our guy." And so that was they sort of stole me from Lincoln, and off we went. So
how did they know you?
That's who I moved to Los Angeles with, was Rudy and Frankie.
How did you know those guys, or how did they know who you were?
They had come to the singer in the band that they were putting together had heard of me through, because he was from Omaha, and he had heard of me, and they were actually, the three of them were either in New Jersey or LA. I can't remember which one, and when they sort of, got together, the three of them, then that's when they came back to Lincoln and asked me to join up. And because we actually put the band together in my parents' basement.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are you still in touch with Rudy? Obviously, Frankie has passed away, but are you still in touch with Rudy?
Rudy and I are still very close. We hang out a lot. So.
Well, I know when you, how far did that band get? Because I know when I think you said your dad had lent you his station wagon or whatever to go out there. And, it's obviously for any band, even now, it's tough to make a go at it. And I think you'd said, with all the mac and cheese and stealing the condiments from diners and things like that. How long did that go on for until, you were just like, fuck this?
Well, it was probably about a year or so of really, tough times. Because when, the problem is LA, you couldn't really gig and work and make a living in LA as a band, because there weren't enough venues that would actually pay you to play. Like in the Midwest, there were so many, clubs and bars that you could get gigs all the time and make money. I mean, granted, you had to play at least, half or so cover tunes plus, whatever originals you would sneak in. That's what we did anyway. We played about half was cover tunes, and the rest was like, songs that I was trying to, spring on the band. Ooh, let's try this.
Was this around like mid-70s or so?
This was, we put that band together in 74, and then we finally, the three of us finally had enough of that band, and being in the cold in the Midwest, we were like, we got to go to LA, because if we're not going to go for it, then fuck this shit. So we were literally, it was the summer of 1977 that we packed up the gold Plymouth station wagon, got the U-Haul, and had all my kit. But got to remember, that's back in the day where, it's like, dude, my keyboard rig was insane. Like B3, I literally had everything, Rhodes, 2 mini Moogs, like, ARP string-ons, like just literally everything. It was like, it was old school Rick Wakeman shit, so, and Rudy and his SVT and all that stuff. So yeah, that was quite the haul, So.
And what led to the end of that band? Was it Quiet Riot forming is kind of what ended that whole thing?
Well, actually, it basically what it was after we had come to LA, it was just the three of us. The funny, and this is inappropriate, but funny for old school stories, but the deal was, we were so broke ass losers, right? That we used to go to the Rainbow, right? And pick up chicks, so we'd have some place to stay at night, because we used to have to sometimes sleep in the car, and that sucked, so sure. We would go to the Rainbow, pick up chicks, talk them into buying us dinner and breakfast, right? And then, like, there's a very famous picture of me floating around from the mid 70s, and like emaciated skinny Bob with hair down to my butt, right? And but the outfit I was wearing was funny, because all of us were sort of doing the same thing. We were just, doing whatever it took to survive, right? But the deal was, every morning, we ask the women that were, nice enough to take pity on us, right? To, hey, can I just look in your closet, see if there's anything, because I'm kind of, strapped for clothes and stuff. So they let us go through, and we just pick out things that were like, oh, I could pull that off. I could see Bowie would wear that,
Sure. Wow.
So yeah. So that, that was literally old school rock and roll. So anyway, back to the Rainbow. So when we were doing our usual shenanigans there, one night I meet this really beautiful young woman, and I started, the process, if you will.
Sure.
And we really hit it off, and we started dating, and she was really cool. And, and turns out that was Toni Childs. And I don't know if you remember Toni Childs from the 80s, but
I know
she
the
had
name.
she had a couple of hits. And so anyway, we put a band together. It was Rudy, Frankie, myself, Toni Childs singing, and sorry, I'm blanking on his name. Pete Castle on guitar. And Pete Castle was brilliant because he was sort of a parallel to Eddie Van Halen, because that was exactly when that was starting, where Eddie was, he was sort of the king. And then, there were a lot of sort of disciples, and Pete was one of them, where, Pete was a monster guitar player, just, but they all had that sound with the Marshall, with the Variac, the little, gainy thing. And
sure. So this was after the first Van Halen record was already out then.
What year was that first one out? Do you remember? I don't.
Oh God.
Because they were still playing clubs. They hadn't hit yet.
Right.
I mean, they were still playing Gazzarri's, and, they didn't hit for another, probably a year or two after that. But one of my favorite stories was, Eddie Van Halen was, crazy ass drunk at the Rainbow upstairs. And so he sees me, and like, I'm like, hey dude, how's it going, man? And he's just drunk. He pins me up against the wall, and he's like, I can fucking play anything that you can on keyboards. I can play on guitar. And I'm like, okay. Like, I don't give a fuck. So, yeah, that was pretty bad. I mean, but the cool thing is, you got to remember, it's like back in the day, there was like, at any given moment, everybody was just commingling. It was just all, it was all just about music and trying to get things happen and get your band signed, I remember talking, with Nikki Sixx about that, because we were having that talk about how we probably were out, at night putting posters up on telephone poles of our bands, and then they were probably ripping ours down, and then we go out the next night and rip theirs down, put ours back up. Right. We were laughing about how, because that was the old days, man. It was like, dude, you have to, whatever it took, Well,
I got to tell you, that was amazing hearing that, because I am hardcore Motley Crue fan, and we, on this YouTube channel, we talk a lot about Motley. So that's a cool story for sure.
Well, here's the funny thing is that, one of my best friends now for about, 25, 30 years is John Five.
I just a couple of weeks ago, I went out to Atlantic City to see the first shows with him, which was incredible. I mean, how
was it? Because we haven't talked in a couple months now.
Oh, it was great. I mean, I only saw the first one, not the second night, but it was awesome. It was funny because obviously, he comes from Rob Zombie and Manson and all that. So there was a little bit more, it was the first time I heard a lot of chugging, with Motley, but my God, that guy can fucking play anything. Yes. And I've seen his solo shows are incredible. His records are awesome. And that guy's just a phenomenal player. I've never met him, but I've heard he's also like the nicest guy ever. He's
just the best dude. We've been best friends for so long. He's just, I tell you, so here's how John and I first got together was John was actually in a band called Sun Kings with Rudy Sarzo. And Rudy Sarzo invited me down. It's like, dude, will you come and help us and, sort of, get us going? Because they had got a record deal, but they were sort of spinning because they didn't have the songs and they didn't have, the whole thing. So I went down and started working with them, right? And, after 5 minutes, I was like, okay, the guitar player there, that guy with all the tattoos and the pink Jackson guitar and no shirt, it's like, hey, you come with me. It's like I ended up kind of stealing him out of the band. And then that's where there's a band called Red Square Black that I did in the early 90s, right? And I stole John out of that. And then we put that band together, Red Square Black. So that sort of was the beginning of my relationship with John way back in the day. So,
well, and that was kind of your first foray, so to speak, with doing a lot of the rock records, right? Because most of the '80s was a lot more pop rock type of stuff, and obviously the Tracy Chapman record, which is fucking massive, and all that. Which I heard you say in another interview that at that time, of course, you had no idea how big that record was going to be, and you were like, maybe 10,000, and
at tops, maybe the top would do the ceiling was 10,000 units in the coffee house circuit.
Yeah. So that's just, it's crazy how that blown up. But then, so John 5 was sort of your introduction into, not introduction, but the first foray into.
Yeah, because really a lot of what it was that, okay, I'd always liked rock, but I liked my first, real love of was early rock. It was really ZZ Top. I love ZZ Top from like way back in the old school. I just loved the bluesy swagger, badass, vibe of that. And then obviously, it just sort of but it was like all those bands. It was Wishbone Ash, T-Rex, all of the bands from the rock bands of the 70s. I was always into that. But in the early days, when I started doing sessions, and because I played piano for Al Stewart, that was probably one of my first sort of real, breaks, because I went, from just sort of kicking it around to all of a sudden. Because when that thing broke up with Toni Childs, I think the band was called Scarab, I think was the name of the band. Because Rudy always remembers this stuff better than I do. So I hear him tell the story and then I copy the story. But yeah, because the reality is that so many. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, baby, I'm doing an interview thing here. Okay. I'm almost done though. Okay, love you. Bye. Okay, love you. Sorry, that was the trophy wife. So, where was I? Was something impertinent?
Right after you and Tony.
Yeah. So when that thing, sort of fell apart, that's when Rudy and Frankie went this way. And that's when they started looking at putting, that thing together with, obviously Quiet Riot and all the, stuff they were doing. And I went this way and realized that, because ever since I was a kid, my first entrance into the studio was like, oh my God, this is so cool. Being on stage was great. I love being on stage, and it was like, it was very natural for me because I'm, just had a lot of fun being on stage, but it was the studio that, that was like, that was my true love. And, and so after Tony's thing broke up, I started doing a lot of session work and, just doing whatever, I always say that the secret to, business is when the phone rings, you fucking answer it and you say yes. Sure. It's that simple. It's like you just do you just do everything that comes your way and you don't even think about it. And then eventually you can start to pick and choose, because when you get more in demand, that's what allows you to say, okay, I can't do that physically because I just, it's not enough hours in the day. So,
well, going back to the Red Square Black, that's kind of what started the whole thing with Tony Iommi and all that stuff too, right? Because they heard that record and then they liked it and they wanted to work with you. Is that right?
Yeah, that's kind of that. Yeah, because actually before Tony, it was actually Rob Halford.
That's right. Yeah.
So that was sort of the beginning. It was Rob Halford. Then this is I haven't really told many people this, and I haven't talked about it in interviews much. But here's a little scoop: is that for 30 seconds there was almost a new band with Rob Halford and Tony Iommi.
That was been incredible.
And we had dinner at the Cheesecake Factory. It was the three of us sitting there at the Cheesecake Factory and talking about what would that look like, if we put this band together, right? And so I really wanted to do that. I thought that would have been just fantastic to do, but just everything just never quite clicked. But out of that, though, is that Tony had then asked me, "Hey, will you come and do my my record with me?" And I'm like, "Sure, I love you. You're the man." So, and then out of that, then while we were doing his solo record, the Iommi record, that's when Ozzy and him started talking, and then we, the three of us were talking about doing the Sabbath record and all that stuff. So everything just sort of, as always, just it sort of grows out of stuff, and it was, that was pretty cool shit back in the day, man.
Well, and that the Sabbath reunion record, maybe I'm wrong, but that was already being mixed by somebody else, right? But then it wasn't going so hot, so you took over?
Well, yeah, I mean, actually, what had happened was that the timeline was that after, Tony and Ozzy, essentially, they had to spend the time to bury the hatchet to say, yeah, okay, we're going to work this out. And then they haggled, and then once they decided that they were going to do something, then that was the first thing that happened, was that they decided, hey, let's go do a live record. So that's exactly what happened, was that they had recorded some live stuff. And, with all due respect, I don't want to, get into that much, but it wasn't going well. And it got kind of butchered, and that was. Did you? I thought you froze up. Did you freeze up?
Nope. I'm just intently listening.
Okay. So yeah, basically, it sort of fell apart. Wasn't happening, and then Tony and Ozzy were like, "Hey, what do you think about?" So they played me some of the stuff, and I'm like, "Whoa, no." This is not happening, gentlemen. So,
and the audience.
Then I came in. Huh?
The audience sounds on the records are sampled in too, right? Because when they recorded, there were no audience mics, right?
Yeah. Well, that was the first clue when it's like tweet 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 tweet. There was like no, and I'm like, dude, you're Black Sabbath. How does it not sound like you're at a stadium? So yeah. So all of the audience that you hear on that record is, it's a combination. I took football, soccer, just in small environments, so you can hear kind of people around you sort of yelling, as well as like the giant part. So it's this sort of combination of all those things together, creating the ginormous applause to that. But
wow,
yeah.
Well,
hey man, that really what that's the sum total of all this stuff, man. Whatever it takes, whatever you got to do to make it right and make it so the audience can really enjoy it. That's it. So.
Well, and I know, you've said that when you do these speaking engagements, like the one you just did at the college and stuff, they, a lot of the kids come up and say, how can you go from, things like Tracy Chapman to Black Sabbath and Alice Cooper? And you're always like, well, it's all music, but obviously you did a lot of records in the early 2000s with those bands that started popping at that time, like Seether and Shinedown and Saliva and all that. Is it different, coming off of doing the Tony Iommi stuff and Alice Cooper and all that, and then working with these guys where, you're going from these sort of seasoned guys that have been doing it for decades to these, new guys on the block who aren't as experienced and not as professional, I guess, at that time, you could say?
Yeah. I mean, but I will say this, that you're 100% right. You're 100% right that they didn't have the same skill set, because there's nothing like, being in the room with Tony and, all those phenomenal players. And it's just like, dude, that sounds great. We don't need to do 30 takes. Right. The difference is one take versus 30 takes, but the result ultimately is great because it is what it is, and the example is like, when I was writing, the Shinedown stuff or Saliva stuff or whatever, it was just literally me being in that brain of like, hey, what does the audience want to see and feel from this band? And it's like, with Saliva, that was exactly it. It was like, I just would get in that, I'd sit down with a guitar and just, and I just like picture, 10,000 people just, yeah, motherfucker, it's like just going crazy. And that's it. So it's just visualizing that and then getting the players to just articulate what that is. So it's really more about just following the sort of stream of consciousness, if you will, of what the final outcome is going to be.
Do you know that, when you're doing that at that time, that some of these songs are, can you feel that these are going to be some of the defining songs of that decade when you're doing them?
That's normally when I tell the Tracy Chapman story.
Sure.
About how the fuck do I know?
Yeah.
It's like, and with all of that stuff, the way I describe it is I just did what I liked, what I thought was cool. And I just figured that hopefully a whole bunch of other people liked the same thing that I liked, and, listen, I'm so blessed that yes, those songs, they really did become a timestamp of a lot of people's lives. And I'm like, that is so cool. I love that. That's, on my tombstone. It's like, thank you. It's like, that was, it's like, that's so cool. But I don't know that I ever thought of it in those terms, because you got to remember, as a producer and a songwriter, you're really at the mercy of the artist, because if I write the coolest song ever, and if the artist isn't at that same level or at that same place, then it's a moot point.
Sure.
The artist has to be, and really the sort of perfect storm is when you get, Brent Smith and me and the band. And when you get Josie Scott and me and the band, when it's putting all those ingredients together where it all sort of like becomes the sum total of all that shit. So.
Well, on the contrary to that, has there ever been a song, that somebody did, but it didn't make the record, and you were like, what the fuck? Like, this song was so great, and like a missed opportunity almost?
Yeah, actually, there was one of my fave stories was on the Shinedown record, right? So, I we got I tracked, I think, about 5 or 6 of the tracks, right? I got 5 or 6 of the songs done, and I just did, and we weren't finished with stuff. It was just like, okay, let me just do a quick rough mix of everything, because the label is like, we want to hear, right? So those songs included essentially everything that became Leave a Whisper, that became this, multi-platinum record, right? So I did the rough mixes. I sent it to the label. I get this call back like, whoa, this is not really happening. This isn't what we want. This isn't really working for us. Like, we got to really rethink this whole thing. And I'm like, really? Because I think you got something here. This is pretty fucking cool, right? And Brent Smith just was like, his head was exploding. He was freaking out. Everything was going crazy. And it's like all this shenanigans, right? And then, like, I'm probably, maybe 3, 4, 5 days later, I get a call. It's like, wow, I think we got ourselves a hit. Same A&R guy.
Wow.
It's like, I think we got ourselves, this is pretty damn good, right? And I'm like, there you go. You just, you just never know.
Yeah.
And and actually, even years later, he said to me, because there was one song called Better Version on that record that actually I thought could have easily been a number one. I thought that song was absolutely, and he actually said to me years later, it's like, yeah, the label should have released that as an absolute single, because that, on hindsight, they were like, oh yeah, this is like a massive song, right?
Yeah.
I mean, listen, in their defense, okay, because I'm not saying that to be mean or judgmental about it. What I'm saying is that we don't really know. If we knew, we wouldn't, labels, got to remember, record label, only like 5% or so of their bands and artists are actual mega hits.
Sure.
The rest, yeah. So, I mean, think about that. So essentially what you're saying, you're 95% wrong.
Right. Right. It's all just wishful hoping, I guess,
So again, it's like, I'm not saying that to be mean spirited in any way. I'm just simply pointing out that we don't know, and myself included. I mean, yes, there are times when I go, I think there's something there, and that's just, and I like, that was a song called The Other Side on the Red Sun Rising record.
Yeah.
It was like, I knew it when I originally wrote that song. I was like, this is something special. Let's see what we got.
That song did a lot for that band. I mean, that song was huge for a while.
Absolutely. So, but again, though, it's a like, you just never know. And again, it goes back to what I said earlier about it. It's just like, I after all these years, I just go, I like it. I want to listen to that. I think that's really cool. So, the odds are pretty good that somebody else is going to like it too,
Sure.
So,
well, and just a few more things here, and then I'll let you run. You did the Brutal Planet record with Alice Cooper, which is sort of a bit of a departure from his usual stuff, and same with Voyeurs with Halford, and obviously those records at that time weren't the best received because it was a little bit different than what fans were used to, and they get angry and offended when somebody they love puts out something that doesn't sound like everything else they've done. But do you think it's even worthwhile in today's day and age for legacy bands to put out a new record? Like, I guess going back to John 5, for example, do you think a new Motley record with John 5 would be beneficial or worth their while? Or do you think people are so caught up in the heyday, so to speak, that they just don't fucking care about anything else?
Let me just backtrack a little bit. The funny thing about both those records were definitely not well received in their moment because they weren't, but those are the records that I like making because they're different and they're exciting and different and fun and cool and all that stuff, and I mean this with all due respect to the audience. The audience isn't always the best, predictor of exactly what, because now I have so many people that are, oh my God, that turned out to be one of my favorite records, right? And that, these people so what I will say about this is that it really has more to do with the artist. Because when Rob came to me about doing the Voyeurs record, we sat and talked about this forever. We were like, hey, listen, you've already made Judas Priest records up the butt, no pun intended. You've done, Fight, you've gone about as far as you're going to go doing that animal. And then I sort of chimed in. It was like, I would love to have the chance to make a record that showcases how truly talented you actually are. And we did so many cool things. The hard part is that, I always, I say this because I was doing a podcast with a guy that was like obsessed with that record, right? And he was just obsessed. But he was obsessed because he got his hands on the original mixes that I did before Trent kind of took it a little south, right? And the original mixes are so heavy and badass and just dangerous and cool. And it's that was such a brilliant showcase for what Rob was really capable of doing. And as far as Alice goes, it was Bob Ezrin and Alice that came to me and were like, can you do this? Can you make Alice Cooper more contemporary? Can you do, And I said, of course I can, because Alice is fucking amazing. It's like, if you give me that his instrument, then I can paint the canvas all day long, and it's because here's the thing. And this goes from, Motley and John and everybody. It's really more about what they want to do, because both Rob and Alice were both, we want to go someplace. We want to do something that we haven't done. We want to, because you got to remember, being successful sometimes can be a real trap, because if people, excuse me, if people only see you in that stamp of how they do, they don't want to let you be anything other than that.
100%.
And fair enough, because the success that comes out of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That's a beautiful thing. And thank you very much. But for some people, hey man, I just want to try something else, because we're musicians, we're artists. This is what we do, And a lot of times with bands, the way I describe it is like, hey, listen, sometimes my job is to take your little palette there, right, and put some new colors on your palette. Here you go, man. Here's a whole bunch of, new colors and new things to do. So,
well, and sometimes when a band does go a different direction, I mean, it helps them out. It can go both ways. I mean, there's there's been bands that I'm sure you're familiar with Bring Me the Horizon, and they put out that That's the Spirit record, which is a little more mainstream, not so heavy, and kind of like Metallica with the Black Album, and it just blew up, and
all of a sudden, next level shit.
Yeah, it's insane.
I mean, think about the difference between the Black record and the it's like everybody's it's fucking heavy, and it's like all of a sudden, Black record, what? 25, 30 million. It's like, boom, thank you very much.
Yeah, it's insane. Do you ever look back at a record that you did and, you're listening to it and you're like, fuck, like I could have done this differently. I didn't know then what I know now. I could have done this. Or do you let it drive you nuts, or do you just...
Dude, every single record, it's like... It just that's my personal obsessive nature, though, as my wife will tell you. I'm a bit of a control freak, right? And that, my nature is to always do that. I hear something today and I go, oh shit, God, why didn't it's like, and so, but that, I'd hate myself if I didn't do that, because that's what makes you grow and makes you get better. I'm doing some of the best records I have in my entire life now, and it's like, and it's just time and the, and knowledge, accruing all this knowledge over the years of saying, oh, I have a workaround for every single thing you could possibly think of. It's after doing 50 years of making records, you figure that shit out, so I'm always down, with reassessing everything, because even, it's funny you were saying about the Black Sabbath reunion record. There's so many things that just bug the shit out of me about that, that I wished I would have done this, or I wished I would have done that. And it's like, that's the nature of the beast.
What? How long do you foresee yourself keeping doing this? As long as you can, or is there any plans to retire or anything?
I'm probably going to do this until they put me in the ground. Honestly, why not?
Well, I guess the last question I wanted to ask before we wrap it up is, when you do decide to walk away, or as you so kindly put it earlier, when they put you in the ground. Is there one defining record for you that you want to be remembered by, where it's your most prized work, and in your opinion, the best work that you ever did?
The honest answer to that is no. And it's because I really feel that in a lot of ways, the thing that I'm most proud of with all these records is my love of teaching and helping bands and musicians and artists to grow and understand things and see things from a new angle, and just help them navigate the weeds, navigate through the weeds. And I really, I'm probably the most proud of my, my relationships with, and love of doing this. And that's really has always been incredibly important to me. And most of the people out there that know who I am, they know it's such a hugely wide, diverse kind of, there is no sort of pinpointing one singular thing and going, oh my God, that was it. That was the defining record. Because it isn't, I don't measure this by record sales, and I don't measure it by success, I measure it, a lot of times, when people ask me about which records, why do you choose some records to do? And I'm like, because I love the artist and I love the vibe and I love making the record and I laugh. I have a good time. At this point in my life, I have to love it. I have to love having fun doing it and, be engaged. The one thing that I just don't really want to do anymore is just, sit through something, that doesn't excite me. So there you go. Just love of doing it.
Is there anything that you're currently working on that you can talk about?
Well, there's a couple of new bands. One of them is this new band that I've just signed to a production deal, a band called Pray for Sleep. That
I know those guys.
I really like that band, and we've done a few tracks now, and I'm really looking forward to making the rest of the record. They're great guys. They're so talented. It's really got a great deal of potential. It's like I just love doing new bands and the excitement. That's another thing that I get asked all the time. How come, it's like a lot of times I'll only do one record with a band. And it's because I love doing their first album, because that's the excitement and I get to really be the architect of the design of what it is, that excites me. I'm really enjoy that. And new fun, new bands. And I'm always looking for the next one, the next cool artist that's going to bring something new to the table. So there you go.